About 9 years ago, as a family, we went travelling as part of my sabbatical. You get a sabbatical usually every 7 years as a minister, 3 months to rest and reflect. And we went camping for about 6 weeks in Spain, doing the spiritual route along the northern coast there down to the main city. And on the way back, we came along through the mountainous areas and the desert areas in the northern end, but not on the coast of Spain. And we were really looking forward to coming to Pamplona. And Joe and I had both read, while we were travelling and camping, the Ernest Hemingway novel, which is about Pamplona. And then we came to this city that kind of rises out of the deserts there. And we had a great time. And then when you go into it, it's a city that has loads of tiny alleyways and tiny streets and loads of shops selling photos. And the photos are all of the Pamplona Bull Run. So you see these photos of the bulls that are released, I think, once a year at a festival, and they're allowed to just wreak carnage on the people. And we saw these photos, and every now and again, our children were very young then, as they walked along, I would go, oh! And I would look round and pretend that a bull was behind them, and they'd all jump and just, stop doing that, Dad. But they needed to check each time in case there was a bull behind them. I didn't tell them that the bull run wasn't on at that time. A few years later, a friend of mine, Nick Vaux, who I used to play football with, he went to Pamplona and he actually went on the bull run. You can see him in the photo here. He's actually this muppet, this idiot here, who's right where the bull is. I love the way he shoved this guy in front of him to take the blow, but actually he is on the horns of the bull. He said it was an absolutely fantastic event from his perspective to almost get killed by a bull. But what an absolute imbecile to do that. Why would we get involved with bulls, especially raging bulls? Here's a raging bull for us to engage with now. Sadly, that's what the church can be like sometimes, can't it? People that rub us up the wrong way. As you watch that clip, you probably got bored by the end, and those people loved by Jesus, sons and daughters of God, they just put a bad smell around the place because they're always moaning. My father-in-law, who died just a few months ago, when he retired from here, TBC, 10 years previous to that, he gathered around the ministers that he journeyed with over the last 10 years. And he just said to us, I want you to just share with you the main things I've learned as a minister over 40 years. And very humbly, he shared them. He shared 3 things, because he always shared 3 things. But the one I remember is he said, I wish I hadn't spent so much time with the moaners in church. All those folk that had just got on with things quietly behind the scenes, who'd done a diligent job of serving Jesus, I didn't spend the time with them that I should, because the people that wrote the long letters and the angry emails and just grabbed me after the service for a quiet word took up so much of my time. Those raging bulls who have a subtle rage to them, the keyboard warriors, that passive aggressive tension, they can really take so much energy. Here's another raging bull, or bulls should I say. Sadly, that's what church can sometimes be like with raging bulls. Did you see how 2 were fighting there, and then they kind of brought another one in, and then 3 were fighting? And it seems so often in church that sides can be taken and tensions build, and, well, I can't talk to them now. I know of people in churches in days gone by that would sit on one side of the church because someone else sat on the other side. It's sad, but it's true. I'm sure we've all been in moments where we thought, if I spoke to someone in my place of employment like they just talked in that church meeting, I would get fired, or at least a written warning. Raging bulls can be so destructive. How about this raging bull? Can you imagine sitting in that car, just parked up, we're having a picnic, some cheese and pickle sandwiches, got the flask of coffee out, and bam, this bull just comes along and whacks you absolutely sideways. Sometimes, sadly, the church can be like that. My mum was amazed when she first became a Christian that everyone in the church wasn't perfect. And I said, well, no, Mum, they're just like you and Dad and me. They're just human beings, and sometimes we do good things and sometimes we don't. The reality is that raging bulls can destroy churches. Did you see all of the crowd around distracted, trying to get the bull away? So much energy can be placed into these people. In the 23, 24 years that I've been a minister, there's been just a handful, thank God, of times when those people have popped up in churches. But they take so much time and energy if we're not careful. There was a vicar, and he put a sign up outside his church, and it said, "This church is for sinners only." The board of trustees didn't like it, and they told him to take it down. By the way, it's Jane Marsh's birthday. She's one of the trustees here at TBC today, so happy birthday to you, Jane. She's not a raging bull at all. She's a brilliant lady who guides and helps us. But the trustees didn't like it, that this church is for sinners only. No, surely it's for people that have got it all together as well. No, we're all sinners. So before we get on our high horse, before I get on my high horse to mix animal metaphors and look down our noses at other people that have been raging bulls in the way that they moan, in the way that they fight and get people on their side, in the way that they can be destructive, let's acknowledge that that's potentially in all of us. That all of us have the potential, if we don't listen to Jesus, to become a raging bull. So how do we avoid being like this? I think that this Bible passage, my favourite in all of the Bible, Matthew 11, 28 to 30, gives us a pointer. Let's watch our Bible reading together.
Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
This would have been a common analogy in Jesus' day. It would be like saying in our day, "Oh, my life at the moment, it feels like being stuck on the M25. We all get it. We know what that means. And when Jesus talks about these oxen, these bulls being yoked together, about the yoke that he has for people, they would have known that. Oh, there's 2 bulls. There's an older, mature one, and there's a younger one that is being taught by the older, mature one how to plough the field and how to work. They would have known that you needed the yoke to be shaped to that young bull, so that the closer it was shaped to the body of that young bull, that young oxen, the easier the load would be for that oxen to carry or to pull through the field. The better you shaped it, the easier it was. Jesus says that his yoke is easy, and the underlying Greek word there for easy is kind. Jesus says to us, I'm kind to you. Guys, we need to shake off, if we've got any of the residue of this Christian thought, that Jesus is slightly irritated with us and he kind of loves us because he has to, because he died on the cross for us. No, Jesus says, what I give to you for your work in following me, it's a kind yoke. It fits you. So don't try and put on someone else's yoke. Wear the yoke that Jesus has given you. If you're an arty kind of person and you're free-flowing, then wear that yoke. If you are schedules and PowerPoints and slides and you love the detail, that's your yoke for following Jesus. If you're a visionary, that's your yoke. Let's not look at others and think, oh, maybe I should be a bit more like them, unless God is challenging us in that way. I find it interesting that this is the only passage in Scripture where Jesus describes himself, and he says that he is gentle and humble in heart. I love it that Jesus is humble, that he doesn't say, take my yoke upon you. He says, take my yoke upon you. Come to me if you want to. Jesus flips this on his head. In Jesus' day, if you wanted to follow your rabbi, your mum would take you as a small child to the rabbi and say, can my child follow you, please? I think they're good enough. They know enough of the Bible. And your rabbi would test them and then either accept them or say, no, come back later. Jesus here says to a crowd of people, all types, even people like me and people like you, come to me. I don't need credentials. Don't need to know how athletic you are, how intellectual you are, how emotionally you've got it together, how spiritually deep you are. Come to me, because I'm gentle and I'm humble in heart, and I will give you rest for your souls. That rest there doesn't mean laying on a beach in Magaluf with a fizzy cold drink beside you, what we'd give for that now, eh? Rest there means actually that it's light work, that it actually suits us, that it's good for us. Of course there's times when we're stretched. Of course there's times when we might feel overwhelmed. But that's when we go back to our Jesus. How do we stop being a raging bull? By coming back to Jesus. Time and time again, in church, in work, in our street where we live, in our family home life, we come back to Jesus and say, Jesus, I don't want to be a raging bull. I don't want to be a moaner. I don't want to be fighting. I don't want to be causing a massive scene. I come back to you and I take your yoke upon me again. And in the shadow of Easter Sunday just last week, we know that the disciples did this, that Jesus appeared to them again, and that Jesus was with them for 40 days, teaching them about the kingdom of God, giving them that big picture, saying to them, I don't want you to be raging bulls. I want you to be people that share about me, whether that's in Russia or other parts of the world. Write it in Turkish, in English, in Cornish, whatever you want to do, but share about me and my kingdom, whether it's in Russia or in your neighbourhood, in TN10, share. Share about me. This was a time of change for the disciples. They'd had the absolute pain of Jesus dying and then coming back to them from the cross. And we're in a time of change as well. I believe we're in a time of change that is difficult for many of us on our journey. Dave Hitchcock, the operations minister, and I went to a Baptist Union webinar a few weeks ago. It was a webinar about how to recover from this pandemic. The speaker, who you see on the screen here, is called Simon Barrington, and he works in areas of national disaster around the world, such as Haiti, where he goes in with teams and helps them to get back on their feet after there has been a national disaster. And he says that there's 3 phases in a disaster. After the disaster has happened, he says that there's a response where we're binding wounds, where we're running fast, where we're looking for safety, where we're focusing on the present moment. And we've done a lot of that, haven't we, in the last 12 months, as we've got used to this pandemic and tried to come to terms with it. And then there's response. Then after response, there's recovery, where we're reviving one another, where we're helping one another get back on track. And he says that this can take 6 to 12 months. And then after that, there's reconstruction, where we restore things. He said the problem people often make in a disaster zone, the mistake, is that they try and move from response to reconstruction, from binding wounds to let's just get back to normal, and they miss out that recovery phase. And I felt a pressure in culture to do that. Let's just get back to normal. Come on, let's get back. We've got the jabs now, let's go. We would be foolish, I humbly believe, if we did not do the work of recovery as a church and as individuals. Has your last year looked anything like Simon Barrington's that he put on a chart here? See this chart big on the screen? Lockdown 1 talks about adjustment, confusion, all of those kind of things. And then he talks about the summer where things were looking good. And you can see it goes through. Lockdown 2, keeping our distances again. And then Christmas, distractions, disappointment, and his mood plummeted. And then lockdown 3, and this really speaks to me. I don't know if it speaks to you, but that despair that we've been here before, and the months are colder, the nights are darker. And then as we begin to anticipate the future with freedom, but also fears and excitement, realisation about reverse culture shock, which I'll come to in a minute, judgment, disappointment, questioning, and readjustment. Does your year feel anything like that, with the ups and downs that are going on for him? We're in the recovery phase, which is about hope, but also about reflection and learning as we look forwards to what will be and backwards to what has happened. And Simon just gave a few thoughts about how we should engage and acknowledge this period. He said, firstly, it's a great period of trauma. Trauma is different to mental health issues. Trauma comes because of a specific set of events, whereas mental health issues come because of everyday life that is bringing us down. And those traumas come to the fore in this recovery phase as we look backwards. In the earlier response phase, we kept these feelings down because we've got to just keep going. But in work, in family life, trauma begins to rise to the surface. Boy, look at what we have been through. And there's grief and there's mourning. I'm fed up with the number of funerals I've officiated at where people couldn't properly say goodbye to their loved ones. I got news just yesterday morning of a mid-20-year-old Tonbridge Angels fan who died in his sleep on Friday. And his family are crushed, and I would have loved to have been able to go round there and give them a hug, but I can't. I can't see them next Saturday at football and say they're in my prayers. A feeble phone call is the best I can do. In this recovery phase, people find it hard to get back to normal. That's that reverse culture shock as we re-enter life. There's some things we've really enjoyed, haven't we? Many of us have said in church life, I've not missed all the evening meetings. And as things begin to ramp up, we don't want all those to come back together. We've enjoyed more family time, not being taxi service for our children or our grandchildren maybe. And now that begins to ramp up again. And all of a sudden, we are not sure that we want to go back to how it was. We've become used to, in this last 12 months, to how we are living. There will be a honeymoon period when lockdown is over, where we visit Granny by the beach and we come back to church services and we embrace each other if we're allowed. But there will probably be after that, Simon Barrington says, a period of saying, well, what am I going to do with my life now? A myriad of choices of readjustment that make us feel nervous. And in all this, we can become quite cynical and judgmental. There can be ongoing uncertainty, adjusting to the next normal. Something that he said that I found really helpful was that he didn't talk about the new normal, he spoke about the next normal. He said, let's not kid ourselves that we're going to go to a new normal and that will be it, because there'll be a next normal and then that might change. What happens if COVID arises again in the winter months of this year? And then there might be a next normal after that. I'm not being doom and gloom, but I am wanting to try and prepare us for the next normal. We found in the services here that we have had to change our plans so many times over the last 12 months because things have changed. Government directives have come in. The way we can do things has changed. It's been great having a band in here this morning, but I spoke to one of the guys at the back and I said, well, that really alters the dynamics of what we do, doesn't it? And we are really pleased, guys, that you're here. Please don't in any way think that we don't value you. You're brilliant. But it changes things. And then there'd be a readjustment again when I can have someone else on the couch in here on a Sunday. And then there'd be a readjustment when the people from the cheap seats at the end of June can come into the main worship room. And there'd be another readjustment in September when we have evening services and the morning services change. And that's just one little microcosm of life. All of these readjustments can give us ongoing uncertainty. And financial concerns for many of us will be heightened. We have Crosslight, a debt advice charity here in the church. If you are struggling financially, please hook up with them and talk through those worries with them. There will be increased anger, Simon says, over injustice and inequality. And we've seen that, haven't we, over this time? Because I think we've had the luxury to be able to pause. We've not been able to ignore those things so easily. And also, it can be misguided anger. I'm frustrated about all these things, and I'm going to focus it on this. I'm not saying that those injustices are wrong, but we are maybe directing other angers and frustrations to them that we wouldn't have had the time to in the past. And this recovery phase is about learning around values on health and relationships, that we're in it together, slowing down and innovation. I used to play football with a bunch of friends in a league on a Monday night. We won the league and then it was cancelled twice. So I've said that we are undefeated champions of that league for 3 seasons. I'm going to claim that and I don't care what anyone else says. But we decided on a WhatsApp chat just last week, actually we want to play football together as mates. That we don't want to be in a league where we might get our ankle cracked or a jab in the ribs from an elbow because, well, football's like that when you play in a league, let's be honest, like most sports, even ballet. Don't know why I said ballet. But we've decided that we want to play together as friends. Why? Because we hadn't seen each other for a year. And we want to be able to play and misplace a shot and just laugh at each other. And also we've all put on a little bit of weight and so we'd like to get into it gently to begin with. But maybe there be that reassessment for many of us about actually what is important to me now. And so I need to readjust to that in recovery. The key issue that we're going to face as we come out of lockdown is that I think we've all been impacted in different ways. And we all want to go at different speeds. Some of us will say, let's just get back into it. Come on, what's the worry? And others will be profoundly nervous. And so we need to listen to one another and to God through the Holy Spirit and through Scripture as we come back together. I naively thought when we were about a month into this, well, we get through this in about 3 months. We have a big knees up and a worship together and we eat a meal together and it'll be fine. But as time has gone on, I've realised in this part of my life that it's not going to be that simple. And that can be reflected throughout our whole lives. One way we want to respond as a church is when we can gather back in the worship room physically together, hopefully from the end of June, is to have a sermon series that we reflect on for a month together. Fiona Tolhurst nudged me in this direction, which was really helpful. I've not got a unique idea in my body. And we're going to, for a month, just reflect together. What have we been through? And we're going to listen to one another. And then the next week we're going to look at, well, what have we learned? And then third week we're going to look at who are we going to be? And week 4 we're going to look at what are we going to do as individuals, as families, and as a church. And my hope is that this will help us to not become raging bulls as we join back together. That we will come back yoked to Jesus, listening to him and listening to one another in this recovery phase from this pandemic. Some of us are going to glide through it, and some of us are going to struggle up to our eyeballs in it. And all of us need to keep looking to Jesus. Eugene Peterson, in the Message of the Version, translated that passage like this: are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Friends, can we respond together? I encourage you to do this if you feel comfortable to at home, and just have your hands gripped tightly together. And imagine all of those things that I've spoken about, that if you were able to keep awake, you thought, yeah, that touched a nerve with me. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, recovery phase will look like that to me. And we can hold our fists clenched, but then no one else can hold them. Or we can open them to Jesus and say, Jesus, I'm coming to you. So why not clench your fist now? Feel that tightness. And say, Jesus, I'm not going to be a raging bull. I want to be yoked to you. And just open your hands to him. And say, Jesus, please help me to plough the field of life with you. Help me to be yoked to you and no one or nothing else.